everybody. We got Dan Cope with us this afternoon. He's going to talk about some FPP plugins. Take it away, Dan.
Hi, everybody. For those of you guys that don't know me, that would be kind of rare probably in this hobby because I've been around here for a long, long time. I basically been working with X-Lights and FPP for I think 10 years now, maybe 11, and basically highly involved with everything. I've been doing the Mac ports and releases of X-Lights. I've been doing most of the FPP work the last few years. I know a lot of people are doing a lot of work in FPP, which is great, but like the releases and builds and stuff is pretty much me. In addition to that, I have a full line of controllers. So if you need a controller that runs FPP natively, or I have stuff available from my site stuff too. So again, I've been around for a long time. Most of you probably know who I am. Don't need to go into too deep. For the purpose of this presentation, I want to talk a little bit about some of the advanced functionality that's in FPP, specifically around plugins and scripts and other extension points in FPP. Out of the box, as many of you guys are using FPP, you can kind of know it's a very, very powerful show player or controller firmware, or like it has a ton of features built right in. That said, we also recognize that there's a lot of functionality that people wanted to do that's not built in. So there's a lot of extension points in FPP that allows other developers to add additional functionality, additional features, or even for us, we develop stuff as plugins that are things that like 95% of the people out there aren't going to use. So why have it built into the main FPP part? If you have it as a plugin, only the people that need it or want to use it can install it and use it. So it doesn't kind of clutter up the interface and things like that. So there's a whole bunch of extension points in FPP, and that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. And specifically, I'm going to go into a bunch of the plugins that are there just to kind of give you an idea of what's there. I can't go through all of them, but we'll go through some of them. So there's two primary ways that people extend FPP. It's the scripts and the plug, like I mentioned here. Scripts are the I want to say the older way and kind of more traditional way of extending FPP, and then there's also plugins. So scripts, they're pretty much what they sound like. They're little interpreted scripts. Well, they could be more than just little. They could be rather complex, and they can be written in pretty much anything that like the Linux system can support. And like out of the box, obviously we have Bash and PHP installed, and Python, and it can be added, or Perl. Like there's all kinds of things that you can write these scripts in. At various points in your playlist, or from GPIO commands, or even like REST APIs or command presets or whatever, there are ways, a bunch of places within FPP that can invoke your script. There's a lot that you can just do with simple scripts. So if you want a script that just like you press a button and the script will record the fact that that button was pressed, and then do some comparisons or something based on whatever else is running, and then trigger the playlist or something. That's all stuff that can be done with scripts if you're familiar with writing Bash scripts or PHP or Python or something like that. Very simple to do. FPP will just call out your script at various points depending on where you configure it. There's some really complex things you can do with scripts, because all the overlay models do have their data saved in a shared memory area. So there are some people that are playing with scripts to map this memory in and then put text on like a matrix, or figuring out kind of what's going on, and just kind of doing some like color blending or something on some of the overlay models and stuff like that. So yeah, you can do powerful things with scripts, but it's not so much used as much as they used to be. There is a script repository built right into FPP, and I'm going to show you how to get at that. You generally just install the script that's there. You have to then edit it to customize it. Most of the scripts need some sort of customization to them. Again, if you're familiar with writing, like using a text editor, they're not hard. Um, so they're there. As I said, this is kind of the original way of extending FPP's functionality. Over time, some of the usefulness of a lot of these scripts have diminished, mostly because as developers will see, okay, there's a lot of people using this script that does this functionality. Wouldn't it be better if we just made it easier by having an FPP command or something built right into FPP that would allow general people to use it without having to understand how to write scripts and trigger scripts and things like that. So over time, as the developers just kind of keep an eye on things and being what's being used out there, we can incorporate some of that. And if some of the scripts actually go transferred into plugins as well. And that's fine. I mean, it's just the evolution over time. Because of that, some of the scripts do get out of date. We have a process right now as we're getting ready for the FPP 8 release, which should hopefully be in a couple of weeks. We're kind of going through a lot of these scripts and figuring out, okay, which scripts don't make sense anymore? Can we remove some of these, or do we have to update some of them to because there's some of the APIs change that they may have used, or some things like that. So they do get kind of out of date. We do have to kind of maintain them a little bit. And if there are people using some of these scripts that would like to help out with some of that, that's awesome. That's an easy way to kind of get involved as well, is letting us know what works, what doesn't work. Maybe even just adding some comments to scripts saying, okay, this script is confusing. I would like to let's add some more comments to explain some of it or something like that. That would be a help. Plugins are more recent. They're designed really to extend the functionality of FPP in a more complete manner. With scripts, there's just certain points that you would have FPP call off to your script, whereas plugins can provide UI like pages so that people could configure things. It can provide new commands, new APIs, and a bunch of other like functionality that the scripts really cannot provide. They're very easy, just like scripts. They're relatively easy to install, and I will show you installing one because there's a plugin manager right in FPP where you just kind of click install and it installs. And then depending on what the plugin does, it would be the next step. I mean, some plugins just kind of install a thing and there's nothing to configure. Others, there are things that you have to configure or manipulate or something like that. And just depends on what the plugin does. And we'll get into some of that. There's a lot of plugins. Last I looked, there was almost 50 plugins available for FPP. There's like a lot of them, which is why I can't go through all of them in a 50-minute presentation because giving like a minute, like less than a minute per plugin, it just wouldn't help. But there are some general categories. So one of the things that we use is we have plugins for various devices. So if you have a projector, there's a projector control plugin that allows you to send commands to turn projectors on and off. Like at the beginning of your show, turn the projector on, at the end, turn it off, and things like that. For various FM transmitters, we do have some plugins to configure those. If you use one of those, if you're using some of the like the stuff that like Jason recommends, there's nothing really to configure. There's just the sound out. So there's just various other devices. There are some I would say like CASA plugs. So if you have like smart plugs and stuff, you can kind of control those via plugins as well. A bunch of different things and more being added all the time as people add stuff. Sync. FPP has obviously its multi-sync capability built in, which is great if you're running a bunch of FPP instances. But there are other protocols out there that are used for doing various sync stuff. So SMPTE and ArtNet timecodes both are ways of common ways in the industry for syncing various types of stuff like consoles and things like that. I just saw Lore released their new 6.3 product or something like that that supports being an ArtNet as well. So you can actually sync with Lore now over ArtNet, which is neat. There are also some categories of plugins that I just call generally useful. So like the brightness plugin and the matrix tools are both just plugins that are just kind of useful. You can kind of adjust the brightness and you can draw on your matrix to test things and stuff like that. And I'm going to show those because they're very useful. There's some integration and extension stuff. A lot of people use Home Assistant to have their smart homes, and so there's a plugin for that that allows you to kind of publish your various sensors and some other information to Home Assistant, as well as have Home Assistant turn on your overlay model. So you can say, like, if you have it integrated with your I don't want to say the words because I have a speaker in this room, but just say like turn on my front porch or something like that. You can actually integrate some of that with Home Assistant. Remote Falcon is huge, and then there's a good presentation on that this afternoon. I would recommend, if you want any more information about Remote Falcon, please go to that presentation. It's very useful for making your display more accessible to people and let them want to watch what they watch. And there's a whole bunch of user interaction things. So Big Buttons allows you to kind of create custom pages that you can put buttons on that trigger various things. MIDI and it allows you to have like a keyboard or other MIDI device to send events to FPP. So you can have like keyboard key presses that lights up bats and snowflakes or whatever. OSC is open sound control. Again, similar to MIDI, you can use there's software for iPads and stuff where you can kind of create a custom interface that sends OSC events, and FPP can respond to those events and trigger various things. Just like push button, like the actual GPIO buttons, you can have a more complete interface like on an iPad or something like that. It's kind of cool. Arcade plugin, it provides a few games like Tetris and Breakout and a few others, so that you can, and actually it also supports joysticks and control pads, so you can plug in like a USB like control pad, or I think it actually supports some wireless ones too. I don't know exactly all it supports, but basically if the Linux drivers can support it, then you can configure like the buttons on the gamepad to do various FPP events. So you could have like the fire button light up a bat, and one of the other buttons light up something else, and so there's all kinds of stuff that you can do with that, which is kind of interesting. And then there's video capture. So if you have like a USB camera, you can have it set up so that like a kid walks up to something and it turns on the video capture so that their face appears on a matrix or something. And so there's little ways of using these plugins to kind of create some interactivity type thing. And a couple of weeks ago, I did a presentation just on that, and it was like a full hour just on some of the interactive stuff. So I can't really dig into that in this presentation, but there's a lot of really good ways of using these tools to create some sort of interactivity with your display, if it makes sense. I live in New England, so like my Christmas display is very cold. Nobody gets out of their car, so it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense for interactivity in a New England display. But for my Halloween display, I do use some of it. So like I said, there's a lot of plugins. If there's missing functionality in FPP, check the plugin repository. It may be there. So if you're interested in creating plugins because there's something missing, again, if there's some functionality that's missing, I suggest you go to the repository first to see if somebody's already created something for it. If not, and you are a developer and would like to add that functionality, we definitely encourage that. We'd love to see people using FPP in new and unique ways. So there's a couple of ways that you can write plugins. There's the kind of extension, the original way of using like PHP Python scripts. And there are various ways of extending the functionality, make it look like a plugin, but it's actually written in some of the interpreted languages such as PHP and Python. And FPP will recognize that because the scripts are on the file system in a particular layout, FPP will automatically know that this is a plugin thing and will invoke your scripts at various specific times. So like every time a new song starts, it will call off to the script and say, hey, this song started, it's titled this, it was written by this artist, it's this long, blah, blah, blah. So your script can do various things like update your website saying, this is what the song is playing or something like that. Various things that you can do. The scripts can also provide commands that appear in the FPP command list. So the projector control plugin and Remote Falcon both use that functionality relatively heavily. Like the Remote Falcon provides a couple of commands that allow you to turn on the voting or flush the queue and things like that. And those are all scripts that are part of the Remote Falcon plugin. So there's a lot of functionality that you can use just by if you're familiar with Python or PHP or something along those lines. If you need even more control though, starting in like FPP 2.7, so many years ago now, we moved everything over to shared libraries instead of one monolithic FPPD, which allowed us to expose a lot more stuff via C++. So if you need a lot of more internal information, you can writing a plugin in C++ is not hard. If you're familiar with C++, but it gives you access to a lot of the internal stuff. So you can actually get access to the raw channel buffer. You can get access to the overlay models and the multisync manager, and you can add commands and all kinds of stuff that you really can't do with scripts. Also, because they're loaded into the same process of FPP and they're direct method calls, there's no forking of processes, there's no interpreting scripts and things. They're much quicker. So anything that has to be done, like I want to say, like on the critical path of outputting data, it's important to do that in C++. So like the brightness plugin, where you need to dim all the channels, you really kind of want to do that in C++ because it's going to happen every single frame. It's got to go through that data and like adjust the brightness and stuff. And a lot of other, like a lot of the stuff more recently, like the arcade and MIDI and stuff are all written in C++ because the functionality is there. So it's very, very powerful. So we're going to flip over because I want to show some of the plugins and scripts and stuff like that. But before I do, is there any quick questions on any of that stuff so far? I can't see, so whoever's moderating, I don't know where the chat channel went.
Let me make it so they can talk.
Apparently not. All right.
Okay, they can unmute themselves now and talk.
Are there any plans to also support PowerShell, or will it only remain Python only?
Well, PowerShell is a Windows thing, if I remember right, correct?
Yes.
Right? Yeah,
Right.
and FPP is running on Linux, so it doesn't run on Windows, so that's not a real option.
There's PowerShell core that can be run on Linux.
And if you can install it on a Debian system, and keep in mind like the Pis and Beagles are ARM based, so if you can install it on like a Pi, like then your script, when you install a plugin, at install time, it will call off to like your script, and your script could then install whatever dependencies it needs. So like by default, we don't have the MIDI libraries installed on FPP. So when you install the MIDI plugin, it'll go through and install the MIDI library. So you can do the same thing of in your plugin, right at install time, it says, hey, I need PowerShell, apt-get, blah, blah, like whatever it is to install it. So again, we use PHP a lot, and Python is used by some of the operating system stuff, so they're already there. But anything beyond that, you may need to install as a dependency. Python version on with 8, I believe it's going up to a 3 something. I don't really remember. We're going to Debian 12, so whatever's installed on Debian 12. And that has caused some issues with some of the plugins. So. All right, so I'm going to move forward a little bit. We talked a little bit about scripts, so On any FPP instance, so like this would be kind of what it looks like. You can kind of go up to the content setup, and there's a script repository browser. So this is a list of scripts that we kind of know about as sample scripts. And again, some of them are probably out of date. Some of them might not be useful anymore. But for the most part, for any of the scripts, there's a couple of useful ones I found the other day that I thought was kind of neat. Like you can just view the script and it'll automatically grab it and you can kind of see what it does. For all of them, you can install it. So you can just kind of click install. And basically that's all you have to do to get them there. And then if you go to your file manager, there's now on the scripts tab, you'll see that they're there. And you can pretty much click view or edit or run them. So like this is a combination where you can put this on a GPIO down, like when you press the button, and this when you release the button. And if you edit this script, you can say, okay, if it's less than 1,000 milliseconds, we're going to do one command. If it's more, then it's going to do another command. So kind of just allows the script to do a little bit of functionality. So again, out of the box, the script doesn't do much. It just kind of echoes some text where that text, I think text goes to the log file, or I don't even know where it goes. But this is kind of a framework for you to add your own custom stuff for whatever you need it to do. Again, scripts kind of useful for certain situations, for certain simple situations. But plugins are very, very similar. There's a nice plugin manager. When you first go to it, this is FPP 8. So it's a little bit different, but pretty much the same. If you have any plugins installed, you'll see them here. This instance doesn't have any installed. And then you kind of go through and you'll kind of see all of the plugins that are available. With FPP 8, it's only going to show you the plugins that we have specifically tested for FPP 8 and we actually know work with FPP 8. If you're using 7.5, you'll see a whole bunch more because there are still a bunch of plugins that haven't been updated for FPP 8 yet. This list may kind of get bigger as time goes on. And again, as people write more functionality and stuff. So again, for the most part, to install a plugin, all you have to do is click install, and it kind of goes off, grabs it, installs it. And now you'll see it's installed. Depending on the plugin, it may add various things. So like this plugin adds a page where you can start configuring it. So there's just, again, it's not hard. If you then decide you don't want the plugin anymore, it's really not hard to just hit uninstall and it's gone. So very, very easy to install plugins and kind of configure them and stuff like that. So not hard. So we're going to kind of move from there. I'm just going to start kind of talking about some of these plugins. There's a lot of plugins here. And I'm going to try and cover some of the more useful ones. Just a couple of notes. For the purpose of this presentation, I kind of needed a way to show some of the stuff going. So this is kind of a virtual matrix here where I can kind of display stuff. I'll try and, so you'll see things flash over here and stuff as we kind of go on with some of the plugins. So I mentioned a couple of the useful ones. The matrix tools is kind of a useful one, specifically for testing. So you can select your matrix or overlay model. You can pretty much turn it on. And now once you're on, as you kind of draw things, it'll automatically kind of go out to that matrix. And so you can kind of add some text, you can kind of change colors. So one of the useful things here is, okay, I'm going to draw a couple little dots up here. Yep, I got that corner correct. And this little dot over here, yep, that corner is correct. So I know the size is correct, the wiring is correct, the start channels are correct because everything's kind of mapped correctly to where it needs to be. If what you see on here is different than what's actually going out to lights, you probably have a start channel wrong or something like that. And it's kind of just useful to be able to test things, but it's also kind of fun. You can kind of, if you're out there with like an iPad or something, you can kind of bring up this page and let a kid sit there with their fingers, kind of draw things and have things appear. Relatively simple. There are ways of doing some text and stuff with it as well, but for the most part, I use it as a testing tool, mostly just to help figure out what your display is doing. I'm going to leave a bunch of stuff there just so we can kind of go to the next plugin and see how it works. So if we go to the next plugin, being the brightness plugin, the brightness plugin does a couple of things. It does provide a command. So if you try to run a command, there is a couple of brightness commands that it registers, so you can set the brightness or adjust brightness up, down, or do some fades and things like that. So those commands can be triggered through playlists or just here, or presets, or a variety of things. But it also adds a menu item with a page where you can specifically kind of adjust brightness on demand. So if you're going out to like record your show and you know the default brightness is going to overpower the sensor in your camera, maybe turn it down a little bit just for the purpose of recording. It may not look as great to the eye, but from the camera's perspective, it's not going to like overpower the camera or something like that, and then bring it back up. So you can kind of just see as you're adjusting it, it's live changing the data. So that's kind of a useful plugin. A lot of people will basically use that for a bunch of reasons and for adjusting things. I also tend to use it when I'm setting up my display. I'll go out like right after in the evening after I've set up everything, and even though I may have X lights pushing it out at 40% or whatever, I may go out and say, okay, that maybe look a little bit too bright. Let's see what it looks like down a little bit. So drop it to 90, which would be like 38% or whatever, 35%, and just kind of make an opinion as to whether I should go back to X lights and change it from 40% to 35% or things like that. It just gives you a little bit of live control over what it looks like while it's running. Very useful. Another one that a lot of people use is the big buttons. Big buttons is split into that's basically two menu items. On the content setup, there's a configure where you can kind of go through and you can create tabs. So you can add tabs of buttons. You can name the tabs. So like, I don't know, my tab. You can add buttons and configure them to have different colors and text and whatever the command is going to do. So we can adjust that. Give it a name. And then just hit save. And when you get things kind of configured the way you want, then if you go over to the status big buttons thing, you'll see your tab of buttons. And I didn't put anything on the new tab. And then as you press the buttons, they invoke whatever commands that they're configured to do. So again, nice thing to have if you're out again with your in your show and you have some kid that wants to play Baby Shark or whatever. You could have a Baby Shark button there, and you can bring it up on your phone or iPad and say, hey, press the Baby Shark button, and then all of a sudden like Baby Shark will play or something like that. Again, just makes the kids feel that they were part of it. It's not like you started it; they got to start it, which is kind of fun. And then let me go turn that off now. We'll clear it too. And then another one, this hasn't been completely updated for FPP 8 yet, so I do need to this isn't one that the FPP team does. This is a different developer has written this. There's all kinds of effects built, like if you're familiar with WLED stuff, there's a lot of effects. Those effects are built into FPP, so you can have it. It's not finding my models, so this is probably not sure why. I may have to come back to that. Let me just do a quick restart. This was working earlier, but it's not now. But you can generally select the, again, this has not been updated for 8, so it may be an FPP 8 thing as well. So you can generally select your, normally you can select what models you want, select the effect that you want, adjust the colors and stuff and hit run, and it'll just kind of go and run. I don't know if this is going to work, but we can try. I don't know. Yeah, I don't think it's working. There's another way to test this later, but so that's one way of like, again, another plugin that's kind of available for doing stuff. Again, you can bring this up on your phone and make adjustments and stuff. So if you just want blue or like a color fade of pink or whatever for Valentine's Day or something, you can kind of just come in and say, click all models, say pink, and just walk away and be done. Relatively simple. So that's some useful plugins there. Going across, I'm going to cover Arcade on the other system. Yeah, we're going to flip over to a different Pi. That was running on my Mac. This is running on a Pi. So the Pi, obviously, being a primary platform, had more of the plugins work there than like the Mac. So you'll see a bunch of other plugins here. I had mentioned Arcade. So there's Arcade plugin puts 2 menu, one of them being the joysticks. So here, I don't know if you can see me on the camera, but I have like a gamepad, and it's a USB gamepad. You can kind of go through and configure what each button does. So I have them configured to actually be arcade buttons, but you could actually create a button that does pretty much any FPP command or starts an effect or something like that. It doesn't really matter. It's somewhat tricky to set up, which is why, like, as you press buttons, you can hit refresh and you'll see what the button was over here. So which allows you to figure out, okay, I just the green button I was just pressing is button 3, which currently doesn't have a thing. So I could turn it on and set some commands and stuff for that. Very simple, or I shouldn't say very simple, but that's basically how you would configure to use a gamepad. Then it also has arcade games, and that's actually configured on the Mac. So for each of the games, there's 4 different games. You can configure each for where it's going to be output, and how it's going to display on there, because I think you can actually do transparent over what's actually running, some various pixel scaling, things like that. A bunch of stuff that you can do there. And so then if you actually hit start, you can actually see on the matrix, if I don't suck, the left and right's not working. Yeah, oh, there we go. That one's working. So there again, there's just different commands that you can, or different games that you can play. Again, throw it out there, let the kids have some fun with it, like on your Toon2 sign or something, and just kind of let go. So that's the arcade plugin. Again, it makes it a little bit interactive. Going back to here. MIDI is very similar. So if you have I don't know if you can see, I have a keyboard. And so if you have like a MIDI keyboard or a MIDI drum pad or something that's really interesting that you can put out there for Halloween night or something, is really kind of fun if you can have like a drum pad that kids can like take a drumstick or something too. It's kind of neat, but even keyboards work. You can configure it so as buttons or keys are being pressed or knobs being things, it does various things. So in this case, like any key is going to send a 0x90. Again, you can hit refresh to see what I was just hitting. So it's a 90 for down, 80 for up. And then there are various, depending on how hard you hit it, is B3. So what I'm having it do is adjusting how deep of red it is depending on how hard. So if I hit it light, you'll see over here, it's flashing kind of light. But if I hit hard, it's a brighter red. And this is using the second things to say which model. So I have this divided into 10 models. So 1 through 10, VM-1 through 10 will depend on which key. So I can kind of keep going up and down and they'll hit things. So you could have like snowflake-1 through 10, and each key will light up a snowflake in a perfect color, a certain color. There's an HSV function here too. So instead of adjusting the brightness of one color, you could have it adjust the hue, depending on how hard. So if it's hard, it turns green. If it's not so green, it's blue, like whatever the HSV values would be. So a little bit complicated to set up because you kind of have to understand the formulas and stuff that kind of go into it. But once it's set up, the kids can kind of play with it and have some fun. Open sound control. I don't have my iPad available, but it's relatively similar. There's software on the iPad that you can configure buttons and knobs and things. Again, they send a string. Like open sound control is basically a string with some parameters to it. So the knob from my app will send this string, and then there's a parameter. So as the knob turns, it's going to be from 1 to 100. So we're going to set or 0 to 1. It's a floating point. So we're going to set the brightness depending on how the knob is turned. Or this is a button. So we're going to do something like a fill there for if the button is pressed and stuff like that. So, and then I think this is the same button. This is a press and this is a release. So we turn it on and then we turn it off when you release. So as you're holding it. So again, it's just a whole bunch of commands being sent with parameters, and you kind of tell it what to do when we get that command. Very kind of allows a lot of more interaction stuff. That's most of the interaction stuff that I wanted to cover. The other plugin that I know is very popular is Home Assistant. In here, when you configure this, you do need to have Home Assistant wired up via MQTT and your instance set up to talk to MQTT. And once you do that, you can kind of go through all of your sensors. Like this cape has a couple of voltage input sensors and a temperature sensor. They can display right in your Home Assistant control panel. You can actually consider any of the GPIO as triggers. So as a binary sensor, if you want. So if you want to record whenever somebody steps on a pad or whatever, you can consider it a binary sensor, and it would kind of do counts and stuff. Any of your models, you can kind of go through and enable. And then in Home Assistant, it would treat that as a RGB light, and you can then have Home Assistant control it as an RGB light. Kind of interesting way of allowing Home Assistant to, or I should say, an easy way. I know, I think Bill Porter has another presentation this afternoon about some home automation and stuff, which different way of doing it, a little bit more complex. This is pretty much just install a plugin, check some boxes, and hit save, and it pretty much just does it automatic for various simple use cases. Depends on what you want to do. I kind of go through here. A new one that just came up this week that I have had zero time to really play with, but I want to learn a little bit more about it. If any of you guys are familiar with Node-RED, it's a very it's a kind of a point and click way of controlling FPP. So if you click on this, it gives you a whole flow of stuff that you can do. So when certain things trigger, it can then trigger other things. And Daryl, again, I haven't had this, just kind of came out the other day. I haven't had any time to even play with it. But I did want to mention it because I know if anybody is using Node-RED with like some of their comp sci classes at school or whatever, or just simple things, there's a lot of stuff that you can do here just by point and click. You can have all kinds of just different statements and switches and stuff, just depending on what you need to do. A lot of the variables are already there in the no red display, and you can kind of do triggers based on what's going on and stuff. Like I said, haven't had time to really play with this. I do recommend kind of if you're familiar with it, give it a try and see how it goes. That's for the Pi only at this point. So that's most of the plugins I wanted to really that were easy to demo in a demoable type state and virtually. But again, if we kind of go back to the plugin manager,
10 minutes left.
Hmm?
10 minutes left.
Okay. Yep. So just to run through some of these again, just so you're aware of what's here. I mentioned the ArtNet Advanced, this because like syncing the ArtNet protocol, we obviously use it for channel data, but it can also do various sync things and ArtNet triggers and things. So if you have other devices that are specific for ArtNet, that's a plugin that might be useful for you. FPP capture allows you to kind of record sequences. So if you have something like Matrix that will send E131 data and you want to record that into an SCQ to play back later, the capture plugin will allow you to do that. Basically just record it and then play back later. FPPmon is my own stuff that provides an app on your phone for Android or iOS that allows you to pretty much control and monitor FPP from anywhere in the world. You don't need to set up VPNs or anything like that. Kind of useful. Don't know much about Jukebox. It's probably similar to Remote Falcon. Again, but it allows you to set up your own pages and stuff rather than the Remote Falcon stuff. Don't know a whole lot about it. Pixel Radios, an open source FM transmitter thing on the Red Christmas forum site. It's a plugin for that. I mentioned the projector control. If you have a projector that you need to turn on or off, there's a bunch of functionality there. Remote Falcon, again, go to that presentation this afternoon. It's great. If you have one of my transmitters or a VAST transmitter, this is the plugin that you need to configure that transmitter. So RDS and the frequencies and all that stuff is there. SMPTE is again another time code over audio channels for various syncing. I mentioned the TP-Link CASA plugin. Scott did a great job with this as far as if you have like the smart strips or the power outlets or something like that that are the TP-Links, you can control them from FPP as well. Twilio allows you to it's a bit complicated to set up, but it allows people to text a phone number and whatever they text can be displayed on a matrix. So you could have them text like their name to this number and it'll automatically say, "Hello, Dan," scrolling across the matrix or something like that. And there's all kinds of like profanity filters and stuff involved with that. And unfortunately, Twilio is a paid thing, so you actually have to pay a monthly fee or per message fee and stuff like that on that. But it's kind of a fun thing if you want to set it all up. Video capture is for like USB cameras. It also does IP cameras. So you can, if you have like an IP camera out someplace that you want to capture from and display on a matrix or something like that, you can do that. And as I mentioned, in developer mode, this is running in developer mode. There's still a bunch of plugins that we haven't tested yet. So if you're in advanced mode or developer mode, you can kind of see that like these have only been tested for these versions and things, and we need help testing them. If you have some of the hardware for this or know about it, or and sometimes it's just a matter we need to contact like this is not a Falcon Christmas. Like the stuff that we do is Falcon Christmas, but this is somebody else. Maybe they haven't checked it yet or something like that. And maybe just filing a bug with them to say, hey, I tested it with 8. Can you update it to say that or something like that would be useful. So after hours music player, I've used this for several years. Like when your show is not running, you can have it stream audio from some of the various audio streams. Like rather than broadcasting dead air over your FM transmitter that's always on, have it just put some random Christmas music up or something like that. Kind of useful. a bunch of other stuff that is probably not even useful anymore. But they're there. There's some stuff there. There's a picture frame. So if you have an HDMI display on your FPP instance and you just want it to just rotate through some pictures and stuff, you can kind of do that. I do not know what some of this stuff even does. Like I said, there's a lot of functionality that is there, and I'm not sure. I don't monitor all of it, so you can just kind of see all the stuff. Pro Sports, I didn't do so much last year. The year before, you can set it up so your favorite team, whenever they score, it will play a sequence. So a couple years ago, like whenever the Patriots scored a touchdown, I had a sequence that would go like flash red, white, and blue with Patriot scores, all that stuff. And didn't use it last year because the Patriots weren't scoring enough to make it to justify it. Hopefully better this year, but we will see. Bunch of stuff with RDS and things. There's just a lot. Like as you just kind of see going through, you can just see there's stuff, all kinds of stuff. If smart things, some more SMS control stuff. Again, I don't know what a lot of these things do. So as you see, there's a lot of functionality that's not built in the FPP, but works with FPP. And that this list grows all the time. So that's pretty much what I wanted to cover. So if we kind of go back and if you have any questions or anything, we have like 5 minutes.
Dan, I'm just curious. Actually, I got two questions. Do you have recommendation on whether a Pi 3 or Pi 4 is better for FPP?
It depends. If you're going to be sticking like a hat just to run pixels on it, like one of like my K8 or whatever, and that's all it's going to do, the 3B Plus is a great device, and I would recommend that. If you're going to be doing things like virtual matrices, running a color light card, things like that, the extra horsepower on the Pi 4 is useful. That said, with FPP 8, we are going to be able to use both the Pixel hat, like the K8 Pi or whatever, along with both HDMI ports. So you could actually have the same device run a color light card, 2 virtual matrices, and the Pixel. And when you're dealing with that, a Pi 4 is just huge. I mean, the extra horsepower there is just going to be a big benefit.
Last year, I was running a Pi 4 with 8 FPP, and the SD card kept getting corrupted. Is there an issue with like the lower end SD cards and FPP?
Oh yeah, and if you go to like one of the big things that I have to emphasize I have an intro to FPP this afternoon. Quality SD card is massively important. Don't skimp on the SD card. Get yourself a SanDisk Extreme 64 gig card, or 32 gig. Like SanDisk is like, don't grab whatever the cheap thing that came with your digital camera 20 years ago or 10 years ago or whatever. Like, get a good quality. Your show relies on this. It's got to be a quality card.
So SanDisk 64.
The SanDisk Ultra or the SanDisk Extreme are like the only two that I really recommend at this point. I ship it. I ship SanDisk Extremes with everything I do.
Okay.
The
Great.
extra, like the difference between the cheap one and a 32 gig SanDisk Extreme is like $2. It's not worth the hassle to not get the Extreme. So.
Yeah. I remember way back when computers were first coming out and there were no such things as SD cards, and you had a regular hard drive, and 10 megabytes was several hundred.
I mean, that said, I mean, again, we'll talk more in my intro cast. Like the 4s and the 5 do support like SATA drives on the 4 and the NVMe on the 5, and FPP 8 will install to those just fine. So if you want something super reliable and super fast, the NVMe stuff is just phenomenal. Okay. And it's super fast.
Thank you, sir.
More expensive, but super fast. Other questions?
So kind of along the same lines. So I run my main show or my main FPP instance from Docker, just because of the extra horsepower that I get and the fact that I can run on a hard drive and things like that. Is that pretty much a standard install? Like, or is there, are you? Does it end up as a first class citizen like
For
Raspberry
the
Pi?
most part, yes. There's not a whole lot of us that are running it, so it's not like obviously the Pi would be by far the number one, and best tested and all that stuff. Docker's complicated because depending on how like where you run the Docker is like configuring things like the audio and stuff is really, really hard or not possible at all. Like Docker on the Mac, you can't even do the audio.
Yeah, that's why it's not on my Synology and is now on a small netbook.
Yeah. So that's the problem with the Docker stuff is it works for certain, it's fine for certain use cases, but it's very complex. And for somebody that's well familiar with Docker, it's probably possible. But for the general person, it's a harder thing to deal with.
I do run mine and for my class coming up next in a virtual machine with a Ubuntu server. So if anyone wants to play with virtualizing it, maybe just giving it a proper VM would be better than Docker.
Yeah. Straight VMs running Debian or something. It's more involved to install because you got to run the install script, but it works better because sound works and things and network works and all that stuff. So.
Okay, we're out of time for this class. Want to give you a big thank you, Dan, and we'll go on from here.